Veni Creator Spiritus, mentes tuorum visita, implesu perna gratia, quae tu creasti pectora.
I'm going to continue a little bit with the discussion of what you do when you blow it or when you think you have blown it. I'm not going to talk about how impossible it is to blow it, because that was what the last 45 minutes was. I'm going to answer a question which came up in a number of comments and on the chat stream. A very good question, which is, if you can't blow it, then does that mean no one goes to hell? That's essentially the question. Didn't the people in hell blow it? That looks like a contradiction. It's really not a contradiction at all. It's not a paradox at all. The situation is that we have free will, and God respects our free will. So if we say to God over and over again, I don't want you in my life, I don't want you leading me, I want to be a slave of Satan, I want to follow Satan, I want the pleasures of this world, and I don't care about the torments of hell. Well, guess what? Sooner or later, God will respect your wishes, right? We have free will. God is a gentleman, and he respects our free will. So the people who go to hell, essentially, let me take the other side of the coin. If you're worried about blowing it, if you're worried about having stepped outside of God's plan for you, you're obviously not telling God to take a hike, by definition. You're worried about yourself failing God because you want to please God. That means that you have not turned your back on God, and therefore it means that God has not dropped you, and therefore he is arranging all of the providence in your life to get you to heaven, period. You can't have blown it if you're worried about having blown it. However, God is just, and he made a deal with Satan, so to speak. When Satan fell, he gave him a job anyway. And he gave Satan the job of being the tempter, being the adversary, because once Adam fell, the whole meaning of life on earth is for us to be tried and improved and tested in order to gain heaven. We don't gain heaven on our own merits, but we have to be tried and tested and improved to the point where, number one, we qualify for membership in heaven, and number two, maybe even more importantly, we demonstrate that we are operating with goodwill and want to be on God's side. And so if we have to see the angels when they were created, right? The angels were created before us, right? And the angels have an infinite intelligence compared to us, a vastly greater intelligence, and they have a different relationship to their will than we have to our will. And they're, in some sense, outside of time. There's a lot of stuff that's different between our world and the spiritual world. When the angels were created, they chose, or Satan chose, he wanted to be God, right? He didn't want to be subject to God. He wanted to be independent. He wanted to be worshipped. He rebelled against God. And third of the angels joined him in that rebellion, and they fell. And that's where you have Satan and the fallen spirits. I don't know what they were doing in between the time they fell and the time that Adam and Eve fell. They might have been unemployed for that period. But once Adam and Eve fell, God said, boy, do I have a great idea. I'll kill two birds with one stone. I'll make use of Satan and the fallen angels in order to lift man up again, in order to train man to follow me properly. Because he obviously wasn't trustworthy in the outset, because Adam and Eve made the wrong choice. So he had to go through like a trial to earn his way back to heaven through the graces purchased by Jesus on the cross. I know none of us earn our way to heaven, but we have to side with God so that the treasury of graces, which Jesus earned on the cross, which was enough for all of humanity for all time, can be applied to us profitably, and we can make it to heaven. So anyway, God gave Satan and the fallen angels the job, so to speak, of, okay, I'll let you have a lot of fun, okay? I'll let you tempt and torment human beings to a certain extent. I'll keep a thermostat on it. I won't let the fire get too hot. But, I will let you be the tempter, be the adversary. I will make sure that what you do to these people doesn't make it impossible for them to get to heaven. I'll tune it. I'll fine tune it. I'll let every individual, I'll figure out for every individual how much opposition, they can handle and so forth. And I guarantee give them sufficient graces to make it to heaven. That's dogma. God gives everyone sufficient graces to make it to heaven. But I'll let them be tested by you. And that test will serve my purposes because it will separate the sheep from the goats. So that's a deal that God made with the fallen angels, and God is just. It wouldn't be a very fair deal if God gave Satan the job of tempting men, but didn't ever let him win the game. In other words, if he cheated, it's like if you're playing craps or something, and the other person rolls the dice into a position where they will win, and you're allowed to just go over with your finger and turn over the turn over the die one side and make it them not win, but make you win, right? That's not a very fair contest. So anyway, so God does he respects the deal, and he lets Satan gain souls if the person actually chooses Satan, despite having been given sufficient graces to choose God. Make sense? So let me see. And how do I know this? There are a lot of ways we know this. We know this from the book of Job, the dialogue between God and Satan at the beginning of the book of Job, where it's very clear that Satan is approaching God, and they are kind of arranging between them how hot, how much Satan can turn up the heat to tempt Job to turn his back on God. It's a very interesting passage. It's only, it's not even the first whole chapter in Job. So go to that. You'll see what I'm talking about, that God and Satan have a certain arrangement where Satan ends up serving God's purposes by being the tempter. But in return, he gets the reward, so to speak, of being able to gain souls if he succeeds. What was I going to say? Maybe it'll come back to me. Another place that we know that this is the dynamic, that God lets people fall into the snares of Satan if they choose to turn their back on him over and over again, is from exorcists. Because when an exorcist is doing an exorcism, he is acting with the power of Jesus to force the demons to release the possessed person. There is a dialogue which frequently occurs, I don't know if it always occurs during an exorcism, where the possessing demon or demons claim that the exorcist doesn't have the right to evict them because the person has freely chosen to be possessed. And sometimes they're lying, but sometimes they're telling the truth, to the extent that the exorcism cannot succeed because the exorcist doesn't have the right, because Satan has the right to that soul, because the person has freely chosen Satan, essentially. I hope most of you know Father Ripperger, Ripperger. There's lots of his stuff on the internet. He's contemporary. He's alive. He's probably my age, actually. And he is a very, very, very expert exorcist, fully licensed, official exorcist. He's also a traditionalist, FSSP priest, or he was, I think. I think he left the order to start an order of exorcists. But anyway, he has a lot of interviews and a lot of talks on YouTube, and he discusses this, that the whole issue of the rights of the demons to a soul. So that's one way we know about it. But again, it's a matter of the person having exercised his free will and God respecting his free will. The person always has the right to change their mind. That's why the story of Faust is in that sense not true. That, even at the very last moment, if the person said, I made a wrong choice, Jesus, come and save me, Jesus will. See, Jesus is probably there with his, ear against the person's mouth, just waiting and praying, so to speak, that the person say that. Because, of course, he wants that soul to be saved, but he can't override that soul's free will. Is there anything else here? Yes. In Goethe's Faust, since I just mentioned it, Goethe, excuse me, Satan at one point identifies himself when Faust asks who you are. Satan says, I am the one who always tries to do evil and ends up doing good. Because even what Satan is doing in this dance, so to speak, for souls, is serving God. So that's the second way we know about this. Third way we know about this is, excuse me, I just remembered something. I'll take a drink. The third way we know about this is from St. Faustina's diary. There is a paragraph in there where St. Faustina is negotiating for a soul with Jesus. And Jesus says, that person, I think it was a woman religious, that person has been so bad for so long, I'm going to give up on her. In other words, I'm going to let her have her way on the road to hell because she's chosen it over and over again, essentially. So I'm not, I'm going to drop her, which would mean dropping, see, divine providence, when we're in divine providence, which we're always in divine providence until we definitively turn our backs on God. In divine providence, everything that happens to us is designed to get us to heaven. It's not designed to make us happy on earth. It's not designed to fulfill our wishes for, wealth and health and family and love and all of that stuff, despite what Joel Osteen might be trying to peddle. It's designed to get us to heaven, and it's the cross that gets us to heaven. So, but everything that happens to us when we're in divine providence, which is always until we turn our backs on God and force God to drop us, is designed to get us to heaven. So Jesus, in this dialogue with St. Faustina, was saying, okay, it's time for me to let her go. In other words, stop arranging everything to get her to heaven. And St. Faustina begged Jesus successfully to give her another chance. So that's another way we know that this is the dynamic. So I wanted to add that to the previous part of the talk. And I hope you liked it. So I will end there.
Veni Creator Spiritus, mentes tuorum visita, implesu perna gratia, que tu creasti